I'm a game developer and Jonas Tyroller is hosting a game jam. If you don't know, a game jam is an event held over a set amount of time and usually comes with a theme or limitation, and the enterers have to make games based around that theme. In this case, the host is Jonas Tyroller, the developer of WOWIE Snail. The time is 3 days and the theme is collaborate with AI. I'll be honest, originally I did not particularly intend to join this jam, but the game dev god sent a genius game idea down to my mortal brain. What if the AI was your weapon? The AI is your weapon. The image appeared in my head of an arcade platformer shooter similar to Towerfall, but the arrows are actually completely AI controlled. So the player would move around and the arrow would follow and attack enemies nearby. Just be careful not to hit them yourself or you'll lose HP. So I got to work on programming a basic platformer, which wasn't too difficult by now because I have the platformer scripts engraved in my brain, line by line. Anyways, with that working, I began programming the arrow. I didn't want it to exactly copy the player's movements, but I didn't want it to move directly to the player either, as I wouldn't really consider either of these options AI. So instead, I settled on pathfinding. Now, I've never actually programmed pathfinding before, so making this for a game jam was, needless to say, a less than great idea. But surprisingly enough, I actually found a tutorial that explained everything I needed to know in about 10 minutes. Which reminds me of something you can do in less than 10 minutes. It's time to add the enemies. I gave them some very basic AI where, actually, you know what? Let me just show you. Next, I needed to add spawners throughout the level so the player can keep going after killing the first set of enemies. I set it so that after a given increment of time has passed, they would spawn more enemies to kill. Then I spent some time smoothing out the movements of the arrow and adding little details like bouncing when it slows down and killing other enemies on its own if they're close enough. And at this point, the game is feeling surprisingly well and even somewhat addictive to play. Now that I've got the basics down, I decided to add a brute enemy type, which has a small chance of spawning because it shoots arrows of its own that will automatically direct towards the player. Programming this was pretty simple. I just cloned the enemy and arrow and tweaked a few things. But I haven't added enough to the game, so I added some power-ups that have a chance to drop from an enemy upon being killed. There's an HP boost and an extra arrow. The HP boost adds HP, not much to say here, but the extra arrow was one I was hesitant about because of how I had set up the enemy damaging system. It was designed for one arrow and not fit for another to be added into the mix. But several code rewrites later and it works, with the exception of a few bugs. So now the gameplay itself is finished, however it is not looking too pretty. So I drew the player, the enemies, power-ups, and so on. The next day, I wanted to add some juice and effects and polish, but I was pretty much entirely busy that day, so I couldn't work on the game. Womp, 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 womp. The most I could do was get some camera shake and particles to give it a bit more feel, but the game is finally complete. This isn't the end though, because the deadline's approaching and I don't have a game page. First, I thought of a very clever name for my game. Aiming practice. That's right, AI-ming practice. Then I fired up Photoshop and started a logo design. I was thinking something somewhat similar to how WOWIE Snail did it with a highlight on the AI in the title, so I tried something like that. And I'd say it turned out fairly well. Next, I wrote a description for the players to know how to play the game. Then I uploaded the game files and finally pressed publish with 2 hours and 56 minutes to spare. Nice. If you want to play aiming practice, or AI-ming practice if that's your thing, I'll have a link down in the description where you can play for free. You know, this concept really could have potential as a full game on Steam.